because he's talking about the sun and moon, and to my mind, there's if he wants this to be our world, there's much greater problems than the cosmological ones, actually, or than the sun and moon. Because Tolkien, this is something that is clear from things like Morgoth's Ring and the Nature of Middle Earth, and much commentary on Tolkien, is his efforts to make a reality in his fictional world that was metaphysically consistent, right? That this is a possible world. Now, I think even in his letters, in one of his letters, he outright says, if I remember correctly, that, there's a number of ways that God could have done things. So as long as, or maybe this is in the essay on fairy stories, I can't remember, that he basically says that there's a difference between what is necessary metaphysically and sort of these contingent theological things that are a matter of history. Established by revelation. This is how God actually chose to do things, but that doesn't mean that a sub-creator isn't free to imagine a universe where God had chosen to do things otherwise, so long as he is consistent with or not contradicting the necessary things, which include both things that can be known by reason and things that are known only by revelation, such as the Trinity, because God could only be a Trinity. Right, that is necessary to God's being, even though we don't understand. We can't prove that. And I think that Tolkien largely succeeded very brilliantly in making his world metaphysically correct, with the exception maybe of the orc thing. Now, I don't think the same can be said for his treatment of contingent matters if we are assuming that, if we are saying that this is a prehistory of our world. For example, and I have a few examples of this that were just coming up for me as I read these two related volumes that we've been discussing. First of all, the demiurgic activity, the idea that God created prime matter and then left the forming of many things other than the bodies of incarnate and souled beings like the elves and the men to these demigods, these Valar and Maiar, these angelic beings. I'm fairly certain that Christian theology just rules out that God did do this. I don't know that it rules out that God could have done things this way, but I think it's pretty clear in the Catholic theological tradition that God did not delegate the making of things to the angels.
I think the closest possible reference to such a thing, isn't that the Sons of Morning or something like that? It's referring to when God was creating the world. There is something in the Bible that kind of, if you think of it in terms of Tolkien, you can kind of see that maybe there's something there. But it's very your general point though is correct. Yeah.
And I think the most clear-cut issue, actually. And this is something that very much brought out in these two volumes, is the idea that the marring of Arda came before any sins committed by elves or men.
Correct.
In Christian theology, so he says, I have a quote here, the incarnate in their beginning by Eru belonged to Arda Mard. So... Right. In Christian theology, in history, as we know it by revelation, God gave dominion over the earth to men. And so Satan actually, as far as I understand it, had no power over earth to mar things until man sinned. That's why he has to be a snake and whisper things in their ears, because otherwise he could just do things and mess things up. But he has to convince them, right?
Right.
And so the idea is that even disorders in nature, even in the animal kingdom, are somehow a result of sin, either by sin sort of depriving man of his total dominion such that Satan is let loose on the world more, or maybe by some more direct result of man's sins. The emergence of disease and, imbalances in the animal kingdom, things like that. And one would assume, in weather, and I can't explain it all, but that's pretty clear from the Christian tradition, I think. So, but Tolkien has it that Morgoth has fallen and is already messing things up pretty much from the beginning, millennia and millennia before the children of Eru come on the scene. Now, I can understand that if elves and men have different fates and different responsibilities over the earth, and so elves could have a sort of a different situation, but I don't see how that idea of a sort of pre-fallen world that men and elves are plugged into is compatible with Christian theology and the actual history of our world.
Only if you can posit that Satan's fall, in the same way that the fall of man marred the world, that Satan's fall could and did have the same effect on the previously good world. That's definitely a point of departure. Right. It's kind of a supposition on Tolkien's part. So I refer to this book, by the way, in the introduction to part 2. It's a recent book called The Flame Imperishable.
Yeah, I interviewed the author.
Oh, excellent book.
Yeah.
Excellent book. He points out that in a way, elves are we're trying to imagine something that's lower than angels but higher than men, right? So that's an example where Tolkien makes a supposal and then uses myth and story to explore that possibility. Right. I think this the marring of Arda by Satan's fall, or by Satan directly, if we view Morgoth as Satan, which I do, is another similar supposal, and it serves the story that he wants to tell about elves. But you're right. I don't think any traditional Catholic theologian would say that the world was fallen before men fell.
So I'm not really objecting to this on metaphysical grounds. It's just that if he's going to be so concerned about how the sun and the moon work, in terms of the actual history of our world, then I think that he's got bigger problems from a Christian history perspective.
Right. On the point of it being actually our world, though, there is an important point here. Tolkien originally, very famously, wanted to write a mythology that he could dedicate to England,
right?
Which he found lacked a mythology. So very much the genesis of Middle Earth, period, from its very beginning, it is linked to the legends and myths of this world, and those links never go away. So I don't think actually just proposing it's a different world is going to fix the problem, because that leaves aspects like why did the Anglo-Saxons call Venus Earendel, which when he encountered that word in Old English for the first time, that's what started this all off, right? So in a way, the whole mythology was him exploring various ways of answering that.